Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to this edition of Tech Talk with Zyxel. My name is Tri Win. I'm one of the product managers here. I've been here for about 15 years. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. Basically, this is a weekly interactive kind of discussion. If you could just raise your hands right now just to say, hey, you can hear me, we're all good to go, um, just let me know. Thank you so much there, Jerry and Greg, for letting me know that. So this is a weekly interactive discussion forum that we want to have on Tuesdays typically. It's informative, it's interactive. So make sure you send me any kind of questions you may have in the Q&A section. That's probably the best place to have it. Also, we'll have some time, we'll talk about the topics of the discussion, and then at the end, we'll have some Q&A. But of course, you can always ask the questions before or while I'm doing the presentation. Now, today, it's gonna be a little bit more technical than I usually do, because we've already kind of launched and released this product before. In the past, and we've done a webinar introducing it, but I wanted to cover some of the kind of the key details about what it is. But at first, though, let me go ahead and get started. Also, this is going to be recorded. We're also on Facebook Live right now as well with this session. So again, thank you for joining and joining me here today. But let's go ahead and talk really quick about who Zyxel is. So we have been in the business for over 30 years now. We celebrated our 30th year celebration just a couple months ago. We were established in 1989. We have over 1,500 employees worldwide. We're powering up over 700,000 businesses using Zyxel solutions. We serve over 150 markets and have over 100 million devices that are making global connections in the network today. Now, we also offer a comprehensive portfolio. So as a managed service provider, as a partner, it's a really great place to kind of go into because you have everything that you need related to networking. I pretty much tell customers anything under the sun that connects you to a network, whether it be a security appliance, wireless, Ethernet with fiber, 10 gig, PoE gateways, and be able to manage all that under either cloud or in a virtual environment for network management. We have solutions that cover all of that. So kind of a one-stop shop of all of your networking needs. Now, today I wanted to talk about CCTV switch, and this is kind of a partner training that we've done to some of our partners. I wanted to cover and give you a kind of a wide range of what this product is, what it does, why security is booming, and what is it about. So if you're interested in that, this is where we're moving into. So what is a surveillance switch? Really, it's just a digital camera, right? A PoE a powered device that is providing you video, nonstop video. Usually it goes into like a video recorder, or it can be managed and viewed online, those kinds of things. But there's a lot of, what's really important about the network portion of it is that you really need a switch that's kind of tailored for that. A lot of the solutions that you have available now, those are very just generic switches that provide some power. They have some level of power adoption, and I'll talk a little bit about what the differences are, why this switch makes it a lot different for IP surveillance and just like net security, physical security in general. So this surveillance switch is dedicated, have a lot of different features that's tailored towards this industry. We'll talk about extended range, a larger PoE budget that's intelligent, a wider temperature range, dedicated ports for you to do uplinks, specialized hardware and software to make sure that the features and functions, as well as kind of the physical part of the switch, works for this kind of application. And then also very flexible port selection capabilities. So I wanted to cover, a little about the PoE portion of it, of the switch. This is the most important part because it's what's supplying the power to these devices, right? The IP cameras, door access, wireless access points, even IP phones, things like that, where you may have security, a phone that is at the door that people need to call or use to get access into the building. So the PoE delivers power and data over a single Ethernet cable, right? We're already aware of that. And what we call a PSE, which is like the PoE switch, and then the PD, which is the PoE device, right? So the sourcing equipment and the power device. That's kind of the naming convention that we use. So if you see PSE and PD in some of our presentations, this is what it means. All right, so the PoE, right, is based on a 802 standard, IEEE 802.3 standard. allows for the switches to power up the different devices that exist out there. The devices communicate, obviously, the cameras, the access points, the VoIP phones, they all kind of communicate back to the switch and say, hey, I am this kind of class of power, give me that much wattage, or assign me or budget out that much wattage. And so they're usually using classification mode. That's what we call it. And their PoE classes are what you see at the bottom there. Class 3 is 15.4 watt. That is the 802.38F. The class 4, which is a 30 watt standard, which is the AT standard. And the 60 watt, which you'll start seeing more and more of, is the BT. It's also known as Ultra PoE. So those are kind of a little bit rare, as most of the devices and cameras that require the PoE, the Ultra PoE, usually come in with an injector themselves already. But there are more and more switches that will become available, you'll see, including ours as well. So this is kind of just a list of the powers that are actually outputted based on those standards. So just so you get a kind of a good feel of what that is, just a kind of a quick reference. Some of the requirements, and you have to understand how PoE works, right? Most of the switches that are out in the market right now, in order to kind of keep costs down, you'll see it as, a very low price, or very, kind of value pricing, depending on which models you're using out there in the market. You'll see it's because of the PoE budget. So they can use a smaller power supply and kind of feed less ports, or have a maximum, application level because of the power that it has in a budget. So usually they have very low requirements, especially for IP phones. They don't really use very much. So a lot of those switches are kind of made for those. But for IP cameras, it's kind of the opposite. So CCTV cameras like pan tilt zoom, the ones with infrared, the ones that have dome and stuff like that, they require a lot more power. And so they do, if you look at the specifications on those camera manufacturers, it also has like a minimum power budget kind of requirement on their spec sheets. So you have to keep that in mind. And of course, if you have a switch that is too low powered, it's going to be a problem, right? So if you pick the wrong one, the cameras will have issues powering up a lot of times, or if you have a lot of them all loading at the same time, they may draw, especially on the initial boot, they may draw more power than their normal kind of day-to-day activity. So it may spike. And so if you don't, calculate for that, then some of your switches, or some of your cameras won't power up correctly. Also, the surveillance system might have some issues as well, because some of these have infrared cameras that will power on and thus consume more power when they're turned on. So in those kinds of situations, again, you have to budget for that. So you have to understand what you're building out to, and then also make sure that you have your correct budget. But of course, a lot of the switches, again, in classification mode could be the problem. So what we've developed is what we call intelligent PoE management. Using consumption mode, we can power up more devices on a switch than you would typically think. And I'll have an example of that, because we basically automatically, dynamically allocate the power based on the draw of the device. So as long as you've calculated kind of the worst case scenarios for the draw based on the specifications of from the manufacturer of the camera, then we can factor it and make sure that we can guarantee that kind of power for these devices. And again, because it's in consumption mode, it's smart about it. For example, in a classification 802AT class 4 camera, for example, if it's in classification mode, it's going to try to use or try to budget out 30 watts of power. So let's say for this example, you wanted to power up 20 IP cameras. So in a classification mode, it's going to require a 600 watt switch. So a lot of power, a lot of consumption, and also much more expensive because of that power supply. Now, typically in this kind of camera scenario, it's only consuming about 16 watts max. So the 16 watts, you'll see there's 14 watts that have been budgeted and allocated and kind of wasted in this sense. But with Zyxel's consumption mode, you can basically power up 20 access points using only 320 watts. So in a power supply of 375 watts in our, let's say, 1350 switch, our 24-port switch here, there's plenty of power to power up 20 cameras in that case. So again, not only are you saving power on money in terms of the power budget itself, or even just powering the power supply, you're saving money there on an operational standpoint, but then you're also saving money on being able to buy a switch that's more cost effective to fulfill the same exact need of this application. And of course, PoE has been widely adopted, as we know, not only the access points, the access points and cameras and things like that, and VoIP phones. But there's also other things too. Cost of savings when you're doing wired connections, being able to put power anywhere you want. So there's a lot of like fingerprinting sensors, door access, face recognition, IoT devices that are connecting security within a building. Those are all using PoE now as well. Just as we were talking to more and more partners who are doing in the physical security area, that's the easiest way to be able to bring an Ethernet cable within the walls into the device directly to power them, and also to provide the access data, et cetera. And so these devices kind of a lot of times don't have kind of expertise on what PoE is, and they don't kind of follow standards and things like that. But Zyxel has the ability to kind of work with that and to make things work. And so we can work through a lot of interoperable issues. But if you do buy products that do have the standards, then of course Zyxel fulfills those PoE standards. But of course, they're already widely adopted in that sense. Granular PoE options, we have ways to just choose and have different settings on the PoE. Again, you can set up like what's the wattage output, what's the like the voltage, the information, that kind of thing, to make sure that you can negotiate with some of these products that don't have PoE standards, right? Sometimes you can set these ports to allow for when it powers up, what kind of standards does it use in order to power up? Also, you can set the priorities within it as well. So again, we have ways to kind of manipulate on our side to try to facilitate those different devices that may not follow the standard. So of course, the best way for you is to get on one of our devices and test that, make sure that it works in your application. Extended range is huge as well. And I'll cover more details in a couple of in later slides about this, but our product will support extended range, meaning beyond the typical 100-meter of Ethernet, we can actually supply power and data up to 10 megabits per second, data up to 250 meters away. And I'll tell you why that's an advantage. Obviously, you already know if I can go further, I don't need to have something in between. And so we'll talk about that. And that's available on both the unmanaged version and on the managed version of our product. We offer a wide range of temperature within the product itself, so minus 20 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius. So that is available across the models there. It allows for it to be installed in areas where you typically don't just deploy a commercial switch, right? Typical commercial switches will be at like 0 degrees Celsius to I think 40 degrees Celsius. That's the typical kind of commercial grade product. But these are going wide temperature range for you, so it can last a lot longer. Typically, that's what it means. It lasts longer in more harsh conditions. The specialized software and hardware that we've done, especially changes to how surge protection, discharge on the ports, and we've designed the hardware itself to be very reliable. So we use very robust power supplies. Also, we don't use the saltwater capacitors. We use solid state capacitors within our products to make sure that the product themselves are long lasting. So the series of products that we offer is the GS1300 series. These are our unmanaged CCTV switches. They offer the surge protection, extended range via the DIP switches, and I'll talk about how to configure those in just a second, and also fiber uplink. So you can go fiber to these, you can use them to uplink to each other. There's also for all those kinds of things. So it's all gigabit uplinks. We will have future models that potentially will have the 10 gig. But right now the demand is mostly gigabit because a lot of the video and stuff like that is typically more than enough. It comes in 3 flavors: a 10-port, which is an 8-port PoE with 2-port uplink, an 18 HP, which is 16-port PoE with 2 uplinks, and a 26 HP, which is 24 ports with 2 SFP uplinks. And these are all unmanaged, and you'll see the power budgets for them. Even on an 8-port switch, it's 130 watts. Typically, if you go to the commercial side, if you just go online and look for a 8-port PoE switch, the power consumption typically is like 60 watts or 70 watts. So again, they're made for, 60 watts for 8-port is a lot of times plenty for like a VoIP application. But in an IP surveillance, they need 10 to 12 watts or so just for the kind of the more basic cameras. So that's what our products provide. Now we also have a GS1350 series. This is also a Nebula Flex ready. So if you are familiar with Nebula Flex, Nebula Flex is our cloud solution. So these products are ready for that. It will be added to Nebula this coming year, within the next, I think, 1 quarter or so, that it will have access into the Nebula cloud. But until then, it still has a web managed GUI. You can go into it and be able to manage the product via web interface. It provides 4 times more, up to 4 times more surge protection. It provides a feature called continuous PoE. The hardware allows for uninterrupted power, auto camera recovery, extended range on all the ports, and of course, dedicated fiber uplinks as well. And I'll cover some of the details of those key main features. The portfolio, again, is of now actually 4 products. We have a 4-port, actually a 5-port PoE, 1 uplink in the 6 HP. Now, I wanted to kind of mention that this one is actually is a unique switch in that it has a 60-watt 802 BT mode on 2 of the ports. So 2 of the ports can be used, either one of those can be used for the standard. Now, of course, I mentioned earlier that the power consumption of the BT standard is 60 watt. So if you go on full blast, you probably can only power up like 1 device, but again, it depends on what your device draw is. If it draws less than 30 watts, then you technically can power up both of those devices. Because some of them are, just above, maybe it's like 27, 28, 28 watts. But it gives you access to that rather than having to use like a separate injector and things like that. I just wanted to check real quick. How many of you in the chat already have used or know about Zyxel's Nebula platform? I know we do presentations and stuff, like we do webinars almost every few weeks, at least once a month, that we will talk about Nebula. Oh, great. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Greg, Brian, for that. And so that's what we're going to be using. It's going to be entered into that that platform with this management switch. So it will have the same kind of Nebula Flex benefits that you've seen already with our 1920 series switches. Now, the cool thing about it, it's a little bit different in that even in this series, the 1350 also allows for you to do some command line interface. So you have CLI access to configure and to get some information out of it as well. So there is access to that. So if you are a systems integrator who likes to go in and create scripts to configure stuff or to grab information, it does have some of that access. But again, all the PoE powers are quite high. Again, in a 12 port, it's 130 watts, all the way up to the 24 port, which gives you 375 watts. Kind of our goal is to try to allow for all the ports to have, the at least the AF standard, which is the 15.4 watt standard. So that's what we try to build out in our power budgets to allow for that. So we have a 16-port version. Many of you know that Zyxel, in our commercial side, we don't really have a 16-port PoE, but of course we've talked to a lot of surveillance partners that we've been working with to building out kind of the feature set of this product, knowing that the 16-port count is very important in that. So that's why we have a 16-port version. So this is actually our, one of the 16-port PoE switch that we have available in our portfolio. And hopefully that will change. One of the major features, so I'm going to cover a little bit about some of the major features that I just talked about earlier. One of the features is called continuous PoE. That means we can guarantee uninterrupted power to the cameras that are plugged into it, even when we go through a bunch of different things. So these are the list of things that the switch can go through. Typically in the past, it would reboot the whole device. All the cameras would go down, and then it would have to wait before the PoE is then delivered again, and then the power comes back on to the cameras. So if you're doing a reload of the configuration file, you can return the product into factory default. You can upgrade the device with firmware, or if in a abnormal reboot, right? Pretty much everything except for a power cycle, like or interrupted power itself. The cameras will stay online. So how you configure it is basically go to the PoE setup. You just check a box that you want to have continuous PoE be active. So that's pretty easy there. But it is a benefit because some cameras may take a while to reboot, and you may not want that extra downtime just for the camera themselves to reboot. It also can provide camera status information. So it displays a summary of the devices that are connected to each one of the ports. It tells about the camera, the model name, if it's available, the health of it based on its ping or based on LLDP. It will also give you the power draw that it's given, the name and the IP address. Now, if it's a managed camera, you can actually click through on that link of the IP, and it will take you to the web interface of that camera. The auto recovery, auto camera recovery functionality is a great feature to help you to maintain the fact that your cameras need to be online. Now, I've been to like hotels that have CCTVs and things like that, and they have a giant kind of monitor screen, right, in their front desk. And you'll notice like every camera has like a picture frame like within that grouping. And of course, it's inevitable that you'll find like one or two of them are like black, like they're off or they're dead or something, but nobody knows because the technician would have to come out and kind of figure out what's going on, right? Because sometimes it's really kind of a closed kind of circuit application. With auto camera recovery, though, it is cool in the fact that you can set it up to check for using LLDP or even with ping testing to make sure that the camera itself is working, right? So it can detect that, hey, there's no more traffic, or based on ping, it's not responding, and then choose to do a reboot cycle. Now, we've again talked to a lot of our partners on how to do this and kind of some of the things that we need to take care of. We can do different polling counts. So if it fails 3 times, then do the reboot or reboot on, like the initial, things like that. Also, we have a resume polling. So after 10 minutes, we'll start polling it again to make sure that it's all rebooted and things like that. We also even gone as far as the resume power interval seconds, meaning that, when you usually unplug a device, people always tell you, well, you need to wait 10 seconds before you plug it back in, right? Just to kind of discharge all the capacitors and the power and things like that. So we do, in essence, the same thing. We virtually, or we using remotely turn off that power, the PoE on it. We'll wait 10 seconds and then turn the power back on again, just to kind of make sure that the product is discharged completely, or the device is completely discharged before powering it back on again. The additional surge protection, like I mentioned, the 13 series has some enhanced electrostatic discharge protection on it based on the standards that are out there for it. Because we know that, these kinds of applications, they're cameras that can be deployed more out in the open, where they're more vulnerable to these kinds of surges and stuff. So let's explain a little bit more. I'm going to dive deeper into some of the features like extended range. Why is extended range even needed, right? So I mentioned earlier that our limitations of Ethernet typically is 100 meters. That's 200 or around 300 feet, right? So usually if you're having to go from maybe your MDF or wherever you've deployed your switches in the rack, it could be downstairs, it could be in the basement, whatever it may be, you're needing to get a cable to go from there all the way to, let's say, the parking lot. So that kind of begs the question, how do you do that? So usually, typically currently now, you'll deploy another switch, halfway through, let's say in this particular case, 80 meters down the way. And that will require you to put in a cabinet or on a rack somewhere. You need to have that switch to kind of take the data. It's one more switch to power, one more switch to configure and make sure it's working. And of course, you have to power it, right? So finding power for where you need to be. And then additional, if you wanted to go additionally some further distance, because we're trying to get to 250 feet or 250 meters, which is 820 feet, I believe, somewhere around there, just rounding a little bit, around 820 feet. That's where you need to go in the parking lot cameras. So you need 2 switches in between to get to those cameras. Basically, that's what we're saying. But now, of course, with extended range, you can just go that entire distance. Now, there are some caveats, right? There's some tradebacks. Using extended range doesn't give you the full bandwidth. It goes down to a link layer level or link level of 10 megabits per second. So that's just to comply with the 802.3i standards. So 10 megabits is plenty in these kinds of cases to still achieve HD quality. Now, of course, you can, if you need something that's higher than 10 megabits because you're doing ultra 4K, whatever it may be, and requires more than 10 megabits per second, like that's like kind of DVD quality. Then you may you'll have to still consider kind of the old method of getting that distance. But this may solve a lot of your solutions where you're trying to get to that distance, but also to overcome the power loss in those longer links. The power mode is based on the AT standard instead of the AF. Now the devices need to also still stay AF, but it'll basically kind of downscale it so that we can push the enough power to go to it. So we have to kind of make sure that's it. But also one thing that we did notice though, is the type of cable that you're using also helps. So if you're using a Cat 5e there, then this is where you'll see, up to 200 meters is pretty good. But if you want to go kind of the full 250 meters and get kind of the optimal, then you'd need to go to like a Cat 6a or a Cat 7 kind of cable to comply with the standard still. With extended range, again, it was 10 megabits. The device should be in 802.3 AF mode. I think it needs to be AT mode. AF mode. And also capable of running up to 10 megabits per second. Now it will force on the switch down to, because of the loss, it's the cable loss, it's trying to compensate for that. And also we're gonna supply up to 33 watts. So even though it's only delivering an AT, which is AF, which is 15 watts standard, it's gonna go, AT standard, it's still gonna use up 33 watts, right? Because we're gonna have to push more power because of the cable loss. Now, of course, if you're using a better cable, then it will probably consume less. Now, extended range is available even in our unmanaged. So you'll notice on the switch when you get it, there are some toggle switches on them that allow for you to choose which port. So in this particular case, and this switch, there are options to have up to 4 extended range ports. So based on your toggle on and off, it will allow for you to say, okay, well, port 1 is enabled with it. Port 1 and 2 are enabled. Port 1, 2, and 3 are enabled, or port 1, 2, 3, and 4 are enabled, right? So you just have to flip the right switch. All you got to do is flip the switch. You'll notice that there's some link information. You'll hit the reset and apply, and it will reboot because it needs to reset the switch in order to get that, kind of set up. And then you'll notice that there will be power on. There'll be a little amber notification in the LED for the 10 megabits per second. Now, setting up the extended range on the 1350 series, which is our managed switch, is actually really easy. All of the ports are capable of it. All you got to do is go into the switch, go to the configure port setups in the settings there, check the box that you want extended range to be available on that. Now, the thing is, do not just make all your ports extended range, right? Only turn on extended range when you actually absolutely are using that port for that purpose, right? Because again, it uses more power. It also downgrades it down to 10 megabits per second, all right? So you don't want to do that if you don't necessarily have to. So then you click on apply, but you also need to apply and then save the configuration. With our switches, they kind of has a running config where it will apply the current setup, but if you want to save it to flash, you have to click on the save button as well. So make sure you do that, because then if it will look like it's running, but if for some reason it gets reboot or power cycle, it will lose that setting. So that's why you need to apply it and then you need to save it. Now, there are some obstacles when you are using extended range. And it could be, you may see some cameras that have these kinds of PoE pigtails. And so they may add, some issues, or because of the loss or latency, the quality of it, it may come into play. So based on what you're doing, you may need to test first to make sure that the pigtails and the adapters that your cameras come with will work fine. But if you're using a higher quality cable, that will also help to achieve the longer distances. So basically, Cat 5e, we're saying you're able to achieve about 200 megabits or 200 meters. Cat 7, you can go the full 250 meters well. So it depends on what you're needing to do. So some tips you want to check. Again, check if the camera is turned on once you've delivered the power, or once you've turned on extended range. Or within your lab, we've had customers who have long rolls of Ethernet, which they've calculated the distances and they've tested that on their cameras, just make sure it's all working and good. You can check to see if there's the ping test within the device. If not, you need to change out the cabling, or even just shorten your length if it's not powering on. All right, so a little bit more detail of the camera recovery, like I mentioned before. It uses both either ping mode or it uses LLDP mode. So you can choose with that in the interface here. You'll notice you can checkbox that. You can either detect via that, or you can ping using an IP address. And again, it can do reboots, alarms, settings, things like that. So the request can come from the switch. It'll keep pinging and see if the camera is alive. Now, LLDP is a little bit better. We're also looking at ways to enhance this as well to make sure that the camera is also still sending, still sending traffic. Because ping, the device may still respond, but it could be locked up internally somehow, where the Ethernet is still responding to ping, but the camera has stopped, sending imagery. So we could detect that. So we're working on an enhancement to allow for that portion to happen. But for now, we're using LLDP just to detect that the devices are there and sending information to the switch. And then based on that, if it stops polling, we do the reset as necessary. So setting it up again is pretty easy. You just go over to the auto PD recovery section, you activate that, turn that on, then you can set it for ping mode or LLDP mode and just configure the different setups there. We have some default values there, but based on your product and based on how long it takes things to reboot, you could shorten it or make it longer. It can also detect the camera status as well. So we display that within our GUI, being able to, again, see the camera PD, the health, the draw, that information. So continuous PoE, right? We just covered that already. And the setup is actually pretty easy as well. You just have to go into it, just turn on the PD device, which ones you want have continuous PoE. So it's inside the PoE setup. So that pretty much covers a little bit of the technical areas of this new switch that we've launched a few months ago. Again, real important to notice or to know that it is part of our authorized partner program as well. If you are not part of Zyxel's partner program, make sure you get on. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does give you the ability to get to some pretty cool tiers that gives you all the discounts that you need. Now, keep in mind though, our switches, these particular switches have kind of a built-in incentive that allows for you to get, I think, already 20% off of the of your distribution price. So you can use that, or also if you're doing bid registrations, you want to bid reg it so that you can get additional margin on it as well. So what we're doing is this particular product is very kind of partner centric for a system integrator. Make sure that you have the margins that are available for you to do this kind of managed service or to deploy these kinds of applications. But if you want to kind of get a full range of the discounts, you want to be part of our program. Silver, when you get to the silver tier, which is only 6K MSRP of qualifying sales, which is probably just like one project, in a half year, you're able to get 16% off, at distribution directly, but it gives you access to that, right? But you ultimately want to get to the gold partner because it gives you a wider range, gives you 20% off of disti, gives you access to lead referral, system engineers, advanced replacement, things like that. And that just has a requirement of 12K MSRP. So just keep that in mind. And those are available through, D&H Ingram, Zinix, Wave partners right there. So we also have leasing options available if you're looking as a partner to do that. So again, if you're interested in that partner program, reach out. You can also go to VARs. We have all the different partners, sales reps that will help you to get where you need to go. We're here to help you. So if you have projects, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns or issues with that as well, reach out to us. Again, my email is try@zyxel.com. You can also follow us on Facebook as well. But if you have any questions right now, I'm going to open up the forum to just allow for you to please use the Q&A section. Let me double check the chat real quick to make sure that nobody's sent me a message in chat. Okay. So yeah, if you have any questions, send me a question in the Q&A section. I can answer it to you now live. Now, of course, if you're thinking about maybe later on today and have a question, reach out to me and I can direct that to you or answer the question for you. So if you have no questions and you'd like to drop off now, I'd like to thank you for just spending a few minutes here with me with Zyxel and just being a partner or looking to be a partner. I encourage you to reach out to us and find out how we could help you. We want to be your networking ally and really just partnership with you, work with you closely as a partner and give you all the tools that you need to sell the product, to maintain the product, and to configure all those kinds of things. So we're here to help you. So please do reach out to us. Any cameras, Greg asked, any cameras you recommend? Now, we've tested a wide range. If you reach out to our sales team or our support team, we actually have a document that of all the cameras that we've tested so far, mostly for extended range, right? We do have some partners. If you do go through one of our distribution partners, Target Distribution, they specialize in a lot of the camera industry areas, and they sell a lot of IP cameras. They might be the best ones to kind of give you the recommendation on which cameras to go with or what's their best sellers, things like that. But a lot of the brands that are out there we've tested. Again, for extended range is where it becomes tricky. Everywhere, when it's in the normal range, most cameras will work in the PoE space because of the standards and things like that. But extended range could be tricky, again, like based on the pigtails, like I mentioned. But we do have a list of cameras that we've tested for that extended range portion of it. So if you're interested in that, we could also provide that to you through our sales rep. So yeah, talk to them. If there are certain brands or certain cameras, you can always ask them as well. But like I said, any of the major brands that are out there will be guaranteed to work pretty much. Now, of course, there are a lot of off brands that are now showing up. A lot of different manufacturers that you've never heard of, and we've never heard of as well. Pretty much maybe going direct from wherever the manufacturing is to the United States and just selling to online and things like that. So it may or may not work. I can't guarantee that scenario. But again, we know that all the major brands that people use are ones that we've tested ourselves for interoperability. Thank you for that question. Schools, hotels, restaurants, it's good clients. Yes, Greg. I mean, anything, especially now, like the security, the need for physical security is obviously has grown, right? So a lot more IP cameras. We see that even in the home now, right? The consumer side, everybody's wanting to have a lot of the Arrow cameras and things like that, just to make sure that their house is safe. So that's pretty much where they want to see. Well, businesses need to be safe as well, be able to monitor and things like that. So we do have projects that are in like retirement homes, right, in the public areas of retirement homes, in schools for monitoring. Hotels, of course, have security cameras and things like that. Now, this is a great solution for that, especially because it's providing you not only the power, but also the visibility of it. Now, there are some in the higher ends of surveillance, maybe in the hotels, they may be doing multiple things. So if it's doing both cameras and data and guest network access and private network on the same switch, then this may not be the right switch for it. Now, if it's a kind of a separated network where this is like, hey, this is my IP camera surveillance kind of application only closed network, then this could be ideal for that. You're new to surveillance with Zyxel, primarily use Synology surveillance software. Yeah, so you could still integrate with a lot of those. Now, Synology will give you, I think, some of the like the storage of it, right, as well. So, we're kind of agnostic to that. We're just providing you the network access, the switching network infrastructure, and the PoE to power up these cameras. And so we don't have the cameras ourselves. We don't sell the cameras. So we're just kind of the middleman, the transport of that video data, making sure that the camera's working, and then getting that to the storage, the DVRs, or then ultimately maybe even out to the cloud, right? So that's what we need to ensure that it works. So being able to do QoS, being able to do VLANs, it still gives you options if you want to do a mixed network. But we do see a lot of the IP surveillance, it's very much a closed network where the whole network is just on that switch, right? And all of that data is just being sent to the DVR to just record the cameras, and then that can be accessed securely via VPN or via cloud, whatever that solution provides. So we don't have to worry about that portion of it. We just have to worry about the network transport. You just got your GS 1920 HP to test with Nebula. Oh, cool. Yeah, definitely. That's a great switch for that. We sell a lot of the 1920s for even this kind of application. But if you're looking for kind of key IP surveillance functionality, then the equivalent switch would be like our GS 1350 series product. So if you have a 24 port HP, then it would be the 26 HP, for example, to do that. And of course, it would be just so much better as well once the 1350s go to Nebula, because then you can manage, a large scale of these switches all in the same kind of platform that you do with the 1920s. When will they go to Nebula? You have to keep track of the roadmap. We'll keep you posted. Right now, it looks like it's around Q1 of next year that these will go to Nebula on the 1350s, but still, it will just be a firmware upgrade. So you could firmware upgrade it to allow for it to go to Nebula. And then you can then just have, it'll most likely have a free Nebula, just like the 1920s. So have Nebula Flex, gives you free Nebula access, and then you can upgrade it with the licensing to give it kind of full-blown access to some of the other features and stuff like that. The auto configuration, the cloning effect, that kind of thing. So you can clone sites, things like that as well. Now, of course, if you don't know Nebula, if you're here on this Tech Talk and don't know about it, we do have some recordings of the previous Nebula webinars that we've done. Again, or you can keep track and keep watch of the future ones. We'll probably have one probably in December that we'll talk about Nebula again. We usually do that about once a month. The next webinar that I will be doing is actually next week on Tuesday for security and speed, or security or speed, right? What do you go? It's basically covering ATP, our ATP line with being able to provide a very high level of security, UTM functionality, sandboxing without having to sacrifice speed, or without having to pay like an exorbitant cost, right? So that's what I'm going to be doing next week on that. So you can sign up for that. When will the ATP series go to Nebula? That's also in the books, probably around the next in the next quarter as well. So ATP will become part of Nebula. When will Nebula beta 2 go final? That I have to check. I am not 100% sure on that. There, Greg. Sometimes because I'm sitting on where the feature releases are on the roadmap, I just see like, okay, well, 8.2 is coming out, 8.3 is coming out on which dates, and I don't necessarily see it as being a beta or a or not. I just see it as a roadmap of when these features are coming up. So, but there is going to be a kind of a new look and feel of Nebula as well, just based on the feedbacks that we've gotten from our customers as well. So also, again, thank you. If you have any feedback for me, either on the presentation or on the products themselves, or any questions, or if you're currently using any products in the business line and want to have some feedback, this is where you get a chance to communicate and actually work with the manufacturer, work with the people who make the product, and try to make the product better for you, for your business, for your customers, for the applications that you're using it for. So please reach out to us. We don't want you to just say, hey, well, this product can't do this, and so I'm just going to accept it. Let us know, because that's what we do, is we work with our partners to try to fix, or to try to make, even add new functionalities and features that you guys need, that you all need to do your business and to serve your customers. So we want to be able to help with that. So this really kind of helps to have that relationship and to be able to do that. So again, thank you so much for your time and spending this past 45 minutes with me. Again, we'll hope to see you again next time at Tech Talk. This is Try checking out. We'll see you again. Thank you.